Good morning to everyone on the West Coast. Good afternoon to everyone on the East Coast, and good evening to everyone who is joining us from the United Kingdom. My name is Dan Pustashak from LinkedIn, and I'm thrilled to be hosting today's in-stream event, Infusing Content Marketing into Your Social Strategies. Now, I'm particularly thrilled due to the presenters that we have lined up for today's conversation. These are true industry thought leaders who have a lot of knowledge to share, and I'm happy that they're going to be sharing it with today's audience. Joining us today are Robert Rose and Keith Ritchie. Now, a little bit about Robert. Robert is the Chief Strategist for the Content Marketing Institute. Their mission is to advance the practice of content marketing. And he's also the Senior Contributing Analyst for Digital Clarity Group. Now, another interesting fact about Robert, he is the author of the book Managing Content Marketing, which is a top 10 marketing book on Amazon.com. He's helped large companies such as AT&T, KPMG, Staples, PTC, and Petco tell their story more effectively through content-driven marketing strategies, and he's worked to help develop digital marketing efforts for entertainment and media brands such as Nickelodeon and NBC. He's also been widely quoted in the press, including publications that include The Wall Street Journal, Wired, CBS Interactive, Direct Marketing News, and Business Week. Keith is the Global Marketing Communications Lead at LinkedIn. Now, he's a former partner and director at Ogilvy & Mather's Marketing Strategies Group, where he designed, measured, and optimized integrated marketing programs for the organization. His long list of successful campaigns includes developing the global brand platform for UPS and branding and positioning work for clients such as American Express Open, Six Flags, Kraft, United Healthcare, and Zurich. Before Ogilvy, Keith worked in the UK, focusing on customer-centric brand growth strategies for clients that included PepsiCo, Quaker Oats, and Deutsche Telekom, among others. He's also been published in the Journal of Brand Management, Journal of Advertising Research, and Market Leader. Thank you, both gentlemen, for joining us today. Now, just to remind everyone, we're chatting for about an hour. Our agenda has Robert scheduled for about the first half hour, followed by Keith, and then what we hope will be enough time for a robust Q&A. I'll be monitoring our hashtag for your questions, and again, it's LinkedIn content, and I'll be serving them to our speakers during the Q&A portion towards the end of our conversation. So with that, and since we only have an hour, I'm going to hand the reins over to Robert. Robert, welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having me, both to you and to Keith. It's really remarkable to be here. I mean, I'm such a huge LinkedIn fan anyway, so. And thanks to all of you for spending part of your morning, your afternoon, or your evening, depending on your location on the planet, with us today. So what I'm going to take about 20 or 25 minutes just to talk about here is how you can take some of the first steps to taking your content and your marketing really to the next level. And it's this idea of infusing content marketing into things that you're already doing. And we'll focus a lot on social today, where we can spend some time. But really, this is about a holistic approach. I mean, one of the things that we really notice at the Content Marketing Institute when we're working with larger organizations and helping them to operationalize the practice of content marketing is that this is one of the biggest challenges to get over first, which is content marketing doesn't compete with the other things that you're doing, whether that's social, advertising, PR, print, events. All of the things that you're already doing in many cases can be made much better with content marketing as an approach that supports them. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today. So to start off with, here's probably a slide that you would not have expected me as the Chief Strategist for the Content Marketing Institute to present. And what I mean by this is that right now, if you haven't noticed, content marketing is getting a little bit of buzz about it. It's got a little bit of hype behind it. And some would say overhype. Some would say that it's merely just a buzzword. There's been a backlash of late to talk about really that content marketing is just the same old, and it's things we've been doing for 100 years. And of course, there's a lot of truth to that. Content marketing is something that we have been doing as marketers for many, many years, hundreds of years in the case. But here's the thing, with the buzzword where it is, and if you're familiar with Gartner's hype cycle, we can say that content marketing is now in what would be traditionally called the valley of disillusionment. Well, this is where the real work begins. This is where we really need to start differentiating with content, using content to further our business purposes, and really where the real work truly begins. that what you see there on the screen is Mount Everest. And, of course, Mount Everest is one of the highest and the hardest things to climb on the entire planet. And that last step, there's a thing called the Hillary step there. And I don't know if you saw this in the news recently, but they've recently been talking about putting in a ladder at the Hillary step. The Hillary step is this 600 feet. It's the last 600 feet that is almost purely vertical until you have sort of, and I don't know why they describe it this way, a leisurely stroll to the summit. But basically that last 600 feet is the last really hard, difficult part of climbing Everest. And they're talking about putting a ladder in there because there are so many people that are now climbing Everest that it's actually provided quite a traffic jam at the Hillary step. And so they're trying to speed the process up by putting a ladder in. And all of the purists are now saying, no, you can't put that in there because that really means you have to have an asterisk after putting in, you climbed Everest because you had this basic help. Well, I think it's such a perfect metaphor for where we are as marketers right now. We're climbing Everest. We're doing these very, very difficult things. It's harder than ever before to differentiate. It's harder than ever before to get our story noticed. It's harder than ever before to get success. And really, what we're trying to do is get to that last step. What can we do to really engage customers? And do we need a ladder? Do we need a rope? Is content marketing that ladder or a rope? Or is it something that we just have to deal with as that last most difficult effort? And that leads us to this first rule, and really only rule of content marketing. It does not compete with the other tactics that you have going on. Content marketing is an approach. It is a practice that gets infused into what you're doing as a marketer more generally. And let's face it, most of us are focused on digital really in a heavy way right now. But even to the extent that you don't focus on digital, from print to physical events to consumer experiences in stores to working with your customers as you meet with them even, content can have a heavy, heavy contribution to how you're creating better customers, more valuable customers, and ultimately more engaged what we would call a brand evangelist. So let's take a look at that really briefly here. So you're already doing stuff. You're already creating visitors. You're already creating leads. You're already creating suspects. You've got a funnel working for you in some way. If you're an e-commerce vendor, maybe you're looking at drawing people in, optimizing the amount of things they have in their shopping cart, and then hopefully upselling them into one more thing as they check out. If you're a retailer, you're trying to get people into your stores. If you're a business-to-business enterprise marketer, you're trying to provide content through a long lead nurturing process to really engage that customer to understand the differentiation of your product or service. So you're already doing things. And as you start to get more responsibility as a marketer, you're also responsible for things at the bottom of the funnel now. So you're starting to see things like marketing be more responsible for satisfaction programs and loyalty programs and customer retention models and customer upsell models. And ultimately, hopefully, getting to that bottom rung where we can see ourselves creating what Seth Godin would call a member of your tribe, or Guy Kawasaki would call enchanted, or what Joe Polizzi and I in the book Managing Content Marketing called the brand subscriber. That's our ideal model. And so we're doing things like SEO and advertising and public relations and lead nurturing. How can we use the approach of content marketing to make those programs better? And especially what we'll look at is how we can make social even better with that. So let's take a look at just a couple of those just to give you some examples of how you might even take the first steps into making the business case for content marketing. So some of you may be doing pay-per-click advertising. My board and management team used to call it the Google tax. But maybe you're doing pay-per-click advertising, and how can we make SEM, search engine marketing with pay-per-click, better using content? Well, let's take a look at that. So on the left-hand side there, you see a basic search engine results page, and you see the advertising there on the right. What I've done is blown that up a little bit. And you basically see, in a B2B sense, what might be a standard ad. Our software is great. Here's our company URL. Get a customized software demo for your organization today. In fact, call a sales guy. Talk to a sales guy. Well, in fact, that can work. And in fact, for this company, it actually was working. So I'll just take you through the math here. So with 50,000 impressions on this particular advertisement, they were getting a 1% click-through, 500 visitors. At $6 per click, you can do the math and see that they were paying a good number of dollars per month in their advertising budget for this particular keyword key phrase. Well, that was turning into 30 demo requests. In other words, 30 requests to a sales guy to talk, a 6% conversion rate. Yay, they're pretty happy with that. That Google lights are all green, everything's good to go. That itself turned into 10 demos. That cost them $300 per demo, if you do the math. That would then turn them into a 10% conversion rate of one customer with a customer cost of $3,000. Now, they're selling a pretty expensive thing, so that's pretty good, right? Well, can we use content to make that advertising program better? Well, yeah, we can. Here's the same thing we did after adding into a content marketing program. Same number of impressions, 50,000 impressions, but a 0.5% click-through rate. In other words, half. And if we stop measuring there, we actually can lose the efficacy of a program. In other words, if we start looking and saying, hey, it's only producing 0.5% click-through instead of a 1% click-through, we might stop doing it. But the key is, and the thing that you'll hear me say throughout this, is we need to measure all the way through. So let's look at that all the way through. So 75 downloads out of that, 30% conversion equals $20 a download. In many cases, if you went to your boss and went, hey, here's the deal, we're going to put out a white paper and we're going to pay $20 per download, you're crazy. Well, let's keep it going all the way through. They had a special call to action at the end of that white paper, which turned into 9 demos, 12% conversion at $166 per demo, which turned into 3 customers, $500 cost per customer. That's not hype, that's math. And why did that work? Well, what they found out was people were very happy to call a sales guy and waste his time and talk to him about stuff and basically get a demo on their lunch hour while they're eating a sandwich. But once they had to download a white paper, half of them weren't as interested in that. But the ones who were actually much more engaged. So this is a classic conversation, if you've ever had this conversation with sales guys at the water cooler saying, we don't want more leads, we want better leads. Well, this is delivering better leads using content marketing. It also can make the retargeting network work much better for you. Because here, where you're looking at a YouTube video where we might retarget ads in the search system to pay-per-click and put out an ad there, well, now we're starting to see ads for content. So when I go search for a video, and this guy always, I know it's Michael Porter there, he always reminds me, he looks like Tim Gunn. And if I go listen to Michael Porter on the 5 competitive forces that shape strategy, how am I interested in talking to a sales guy at that point versus how much more interested am I in actually clicking through to a piece of content? Much higher. It can actually make the retargeting network work much better. How can we make PR better? I'm a huge fan of PR. PR is such a huge, a wonderful element in every organization, and I think in many ways has gone a little lost of late. So how can we make PR really the corporate storyteller and make much more effective marketing using content? Well, here's a great story. David Meerman Scott tells the story, and it's a wonderful one. So a while back, and you may know Eloqua, the software company, and they were just acquired by Oracle. But a few years ago, Eloqua was actually talking about their main competitor getting acquired by Oracle. So Oracle acquires Eloqua's main competitor there, and basically a company called Market to Lead, and does what they normally do. They issue a press release that says basically, we've acquired the intellectual assets and the synergies and going forward statements and blah, 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 the very typical press release. Well, that's not very compelling at all. And that does what most normal press releases do. But Eloqua did something really interesting. CEO of Eloqua gets up out of bed, sees that his Google alert's gone off and that the Oracle has now acquired his main competitor. He writes a simple blog post. And the simple blog post is in plain language telling the story. What does this mean to competitors? What does this mean to our customers? What does this mean to everybody that matters to us, our employees, your employees, et cetera, et cetera? And then they did something really amazing. They started publicizing and press releasing the blog post, a piece of content. So now guess which one the mainstream media wants to talk to? Guess who gets quoted? And according to the story, Eloqua closed a couple of $1 million of business worth out of covering this actual story. This is David Meerman Scott's newsjacking very quickly. State Farm Insurance, another great example here. So State Farm, a rank and file practitioner, PR manager, got together because she wanted to meet William Shatner. And she'd heard that basically he had burned himself. And for those of you in the UK, I'll just quickly explain, us in America, for some unknown reason, we like to deep pat fry turkeys on our holidays. So I don't know why we do that, but we do. And he had burned himself on a deep pat fryer, deep pat frying a turkey. And she said, what a great way to meet William Shatner, is I'll go out and actually have him do a PSA. So she called his agent. They talked to him. He would do it. They flew out literally with 2 people and a couple of iPhone cameras. That's literally his backyard that you see him filming in. They wrote a script on the way out there, and they did a really funny version of him burning himself on a deep fat fryer, and then another version of him actually doing it correctly. Well, then they sent it out to all the mainstream media and all of that because they were basically marketing a piece of content, and it went viral. It basically hit Good Morning America and the CNN, and all of the news stations played it, which was really nice, and they figured they got a couple of $1 million worth of earned media out of this particular piece of content. And you go, earned media, okay, yeah, not, whatever, earned media is funny money. But then they noticed one thing that was really important. The number of deep fat fryer turkey claims that year went down by a few $1,000,000. So it actually saved them huge money in terms of customers by producing a piece of content that mattered. SEO. Can we make SEO better using content? So here's the thing. With all of the new farm animal menagerie updates that Google has infinite wisdom has started to deploy, penguin and panda and zebra and all of these things and all of the new ones that will come, the idea of producing more and more content for search long tail is just over. We need to be focused on producing quality content. So here's an example of a company that actually used SEO in a really interesting way. So instead of focusing on publishing content events, keywords and key phrases that they thought would be popular today, they actually thought of what are the keywords and key phrases and strategies that we will be passionate about a year from now. This is the classic in Wayne Gretzky, skate to where the puck is going, not to where the puck is. So what are people not talking about today, but will be talking about a year from now, which is about the amount of time that it's going to take for our content to become popular and resonant on the search engine. So they started creating this content about stuff that the analysts were talking about and that were getting talked about in conferences, but not necessarily the consumers were really searching for. So what happens a year later? Well, a year later, they're doing this content, focused, passionate, wonderful stuff. Organic traffic, down 30%. Again, we stop measuring there, we are going to miss the boat because we're saying if traffic's down 30%, we'll stop that program immediately. But here's the thing. Engagement on that content, up 150%. Inbound links, up 40%. Why? Because they're talking about stuff that people are interested in. So they're getting linked to. They're getting talked about. People want to read the content that they're actually producing. Social sharing, up 100%. Sales, the most important metric off of organic sales, up 185%. Because they're not creating more visitors, they're creating better visitors, people who are more engaged about what they're talking about and are more interested in it as a thought leader in what they're actually talking about in their content. Can we create better customers? That's really the theme here, is can we work on creating more valuable customers? In many cases, content marketing is used as a way to draw in more visitors, more leads, more followers, more likes. And what I want you to start thinking about is, yes, more is very often important, but better is sometimes better too. Can we use content to create a more engaged customer, a deeper relationship with customers, so that we can actually do something better with them? Here's a wonderful example of how social has such a huge power. So this is a company that does the debt consolidation, where they consolidate all your debt into one bill. And what they noticed was that they had about a 1 hour close rate on customers. If they got somebody on the phone and they started talking to them, they would close that customer within an hour. And they would start, billing them and setting up their account, which of course has a lot of cost to it to set up this new customer. So they decided to do a program where they used social media to engage those customers before they actually talked to them. And what they found was that those customers actually took 3 weeks to close instead of an hour. And again, if we stop measuring there, we go, that's just crazy. 3 weeks versus an hour? But then we looked at the customers that they're actually closing. Well, they were 217% more likely to make their first payment and to continue making payments than a customer that they'd closed using the traditional methods. So they weren't creating more customers, but creating more valuable customers. Therefore, the investment in content and engagement made such a tremendous difference for them. All of these things have one thing in common. And the one thing that they really have in common in terms of is this equation. And I'm going to skip the second one because I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But the first part of that equation is they had a smart strategy. We can no longer just have a Twitter strategy, a Facebook strategy. We've all had the airline magazine thrown down on our desk to say, hey, where are we on a blog? Hey, where are we on Facebook? That is the wrong way to think about it. We need to start to think about our content as a measure of the way that we're going to engage consumers more holistically and get it infused into what we're going to do. Social can be an incredibly important piece of that. And when Keith talks about the life cycle of LinkedIn, you're going to hear directly about how each piece of the social media pie can be actually divvied up into a smart strategy and really plays into the idea of engagement from the top of the funnel all the way through the bottom. So just as an example of that, let's look at some numbers that we run every year. This is a study that CMI does in conjunction with Marketing Pros each year, where we look at content marketing and the trends within the industry. And one of the questions we ask is, let's look at B2B enterprise marketers who use various social media platforms and how they distribute the content and which ones are the most popular. And I will tell you, by the way, that the B2C one we also do. So both studies are available on the CMI website if you want to see them in their full. And the numbers are very, very similar. But here's the thing. If we look at this and we go, yes, okay, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn, very similar numbers in the low 70s to 80%, basically all within 10% of one another. And there we are. We can see that it's very, very popular. But if we peel back that a minute and go, well, what is the strategy behind that? Because if we look at the surface of this, we go, well, one is really not any better than another. Really? Everybody uses them and everybody should use them? Well, maybe, maybe not. If we have a smart strategy about this, about why we're going to use this particular channel, that is the really important thing. It's not a question of how many, it's a question of why. Because if we look at it, the reasons for using a particular network are very, very different. In the work that we do with organizations, basically we discover the reasons why organizations, whether they realize it or not, are using various social media channels are very different. Facebook is almost always about amplification. Everybody's on Facebook, so therefore we want to amplify any message we're using and get pictures of cute cats up there and wonderful videos and get lots of likes. Shareability with Twitter. It's all about, it's so easy to share with Twitter. It's easy to retweet, it's easy to tweet, it's easy to create content, and easy to share with multiple people on Twitter. YouTube, let's be honest, YouTube is not about anything having to do with the community or networking with anybody. Nobody uses YouTube to build a community. They all build it because it's a distribution network for a content type that they don't want to actually put on their site. We all use YouTube for the same reason, which is to embed videos so that we don't have to get in our own customized video player on our own website. And then LinkedIn is something different. It's about the quality of the network. So if I'm trying to reach a highly targeted niche audience in a very highly qualitative way, LinkedIn might be the perfect example for me. And you can see it when you start to look at things from a B2B perspective anyway, like lead generation. So if we look at lead generation velocity, in other words, how many leads are we getting, well, LinkedIn barely wins in a B2B situation, 44% versus 35% versus 31%. Okay, it wins, but not handily. But the interesting thing is, the studies have also shown that in a B2B situation, the lead quality that you can get from LinkedIn is much higher. And so that's really interesting. If I'm a B2B marketer and I'm trying to deliver better leads into the organization, not necessarily more leads, might I then consider using something like LinkedIn over the other social networks? And your mileage is going to vary on that based on the kind of product and service that you're offering. The key is that a smart strategy that supports that is what's important. The second piece, and the one that I actually am most passionate about, is the idea of remarkable content. This is what Jay Baer would call utility content, content that actually somebody would pay for, somebody valuable, super remarkable content. This is the idea that is so important to me, and I hope for you, is the idea of creating remarkable content that differentiates you, that your customers want to invest time and effort in. I was very lucky to happen to get to talk to Jonathan Mildenhall, who is the worldwide head of creative and marketing for Coca-Cola. And he taught me a lot of things when we sat down and talked together, but they're passionate about content. And one of the most interesting things to me is when he talked about his 70-20-10 investment model. And if you guys haven't, by the way, gone onto YouTube and looked at their Content 2020 project, if you just go search for Content 2020 on YouTube, you'll find it right away. There's 2 videos. It'll take you all of 24 minutes to watch. Just remarkable, wonderful strategies. They're planning on doubling the size of their business using content, what they call liquid content, shared through social media. And his 70-20-10 investment split is a really interesting idea, because what he says is 70% of the content we create is the stuff we know we need to create. I got polar bears to create. I got happiness factories to create. It's content that we know we got to do. Then there's 20% that we think of as kind of interesting. They're maybe experimental. Maybe it's co-branded stuff. Maybe it's stuff that is thought leadership, or it's our tentpole content. And then he said there's the 10%. The 10% content is the content that we want to create that is so remarkable that it might either fall flat on its face and fail, or it's going to move the needle exponentially. And that's where I find the biggest challenge with most organizations, is that it's very hard for us to focus on the 10%. We get very wrapped up in our content programs onto feeding the monster. How can we get more content out? How can we get more content, more press releases, more blogs, more newsletters, more items for our newsletters, more pieces of collateral? And if we can take a moment and take a step back and think about that 10%, Because I asked Jonathan, I said, okay, well, that 10% must be the most expensive to do. And he said, actually, quite the opposite. The 10% is usually the easiest to execute, and it's usually very inexpensive, if not the least inexpensive to execute. The hard part is for us to actually devote the time to sit in a room and actually brainstorm what that 10% is. And this is something that I see in organizations of all sizes, small businesses, medium-sized businesses, enterprise-sized businesses. The idea that we can just take 10% and actually really figure out what we're going to do to be truly remarkable and move the needle. And so as I finish off here, what I would just encourage you to do is as you start going forward and looking at how you can infuse remarkable content into your social strategies and how that can parlay into how you can reuse content and infuse it into the other broader parts of your marketing strategy, what I would really encourage you to do is focus on the remarkable. How can you create content so wonderful that it's almost as important, if not more important in some cases, than the product or services that you're creating? Engage, enchant, and keep your audience engaged. You will create better customers, you will create more customers, and you'll ultimately create higher brand loyalty for your organization. At the end of this, what I always say is it's your story and it's your company's story, so why wouldn't you make it remarkable? And with that, I'll turn it back over to the LinkedIn guys, and I await your questions and answers. And thank you again for having me.
Thanks, Robert. Hi, everyone. This is Keith Ritchie from LinkedIn. It's good to be speaking with you today, whether it's morning, noon, or night. So really appreciate those dialing in from particularly overseas, but also from other time zones than where I'm in, which is Pacific time. So as Robert highlighted, marketers are using social platforms to share content, and they're using LinkedIn on par with other social platforms. So for the next 15 minutes, before we get to the questions, I'll talk specifically about your opportunity to do content marketing on LinkedIn, and we'll look at a couple of success stories from our customers. And when I'm wrapped there, we will take your questions for the final 15 minutes. So Robert's talked about a number of reasons why content marketing is particularly important now. And here's another big reason. It's because with digital technology playing a larger and larger role in how buyers navigate their world, brands have been disintermediated from their buyers to a larger and larger degree. Buyers are getting savvier, and they're not persuaded by advertising alone. They're using the web, they're using social, they're using search, they're reaching out to their peers, they're getting expert advice, all without reaching out directly to a brand. And they're doing this to educate themselves during the buying process. This means that they're forming perceptions about brands without those brands having an opportunity to share their perspective and to help shape those perceptions. So as a result, and their research from Forrester backs this up, at a minimum, buyers are 60% of the way through the purchase process before they reach out to a brand and initiate that direct content, initiate that direct contact. So content marketing is particularly vital now. It's probably more important than it's ever been, even though, as Robert was pointing out, it's definitely more than 100 years old. And it's more important than ever because sharing authentic content is a way brands can connect with buyers while they're informing themselves in these earlier stages of the purchase process. So on LinkedIn, we offer brands a way to share content with a premium audience of the world's professionals. And many of you probably know, we're now the world's largest professional network. We have 1 out of every 3 professionals on the planet. So that's 225 plus million members on LinkedIn out of approximately 600 million professionals globally. This is the largest group anywhere of influential, affluent, and educated people. And the content marketing opportunity on LinkedIn specifically exists because that's exactly what our members seek. They're seeking content. And the reason they're seeking content is because the mindset that they're operating in when they're on the professional network. So we did research with TNS, a global piece of research, and we explored the differences and distinctions between the personal mindset and the professional mindset. So the mindset of someone when they're on a personal social network, like a Facebook or a Twitter, versus the mindset of that same person when they're on a professional social network, like a LinkedIn. And what we showed, and what the research found, is that the mindset on professional networks is one of investing time versus spending time on personal networks. And this, we call it the professional mindset. It clearly distinguishes the context of LinkedIn versus the personal social networks. And the professional mindset's also aspirational, we found. So members are thinking about how they can achieve their ambitions and provide a better life for their families. They're thinking about how they're going to be great at what they do in order to achieve those ambitions. So it's really well suited to brands using content to influence buying decisions. In fact, our members are 6 times more engaged with content on LinkedIn than they are with our jobs properties. So there's a lot of content consumption, and it's driven by this professional mindset of wanting to be better at what you do. And our members are investing time in content from 4 primary sources: influencers, LinkedIn Today and the channels, groups, and brands themselves. So I'll talk a little bit about each of these. So for influencers, members are getting unique content from global thought leaders that they can't get anywhere else. So our influencers program, which was started in October of 2012, now includes over 240 of the most influential thought leaders, from Richard Branson to President Obama and many more. And this enables these influencers themselves to become publishers, but more importantly, it enables our members to get insights from the leading luminaries in business, politics, nonprofit. Bill Gates, for example, just joined a couple weeks ago as an influencer. So in the case of Richard Branson, there are more than 2 million members who are following him, engaging with his content and sharing it with their networks. And then LinkedIn Today, it's like a personalized trade publication. So it delivers to our members the top stories they need to know from their network and from their industry. And we've refreshed LinkedIn Today by adding channels, which streamline how members are able to keep track of the topics that matter to them. And so for marketers, if you're a marketer, we have a social media channel and a marketing strategies channel that curate and aggregate relevant content around those topics. There are 20 other channels now, and we're going to keep adding them. And they range from topics around your career to a big ideas and innovation channel. And we'll be adding more of those over time. And with groups, LinkedIn members are sharing their own insights and knowledge in over 2.1 million groups on LinkedIn. And these groups are places where rich conversations are happening on particular topics. So a member can start a group about any topic. I'm in a social media group, also a healthcare technology group, and brands like Citi and Staples have also founded their own groups in partnership with LinkedIn. And for example, Citi has a group on professional women, and Staples has a group on small business. So there's a big role for brands to play in groups as well, which brings us to this last source of insight, brands. And so on LinkedIn, members are able to follow specific brands and engage with them and the content that these brands share directly with members of the platform. So there's a lot of engagement already happening between brands and members, and I'll talk to you more specifically about that in the upcoming slides. So what all this means is that our members are actively seeking content on LinkedIn, and they're actively seeking content from brands. So brands can build relationships by using LinkedIn's accurate targeting to deliver relevant content. Compared with other professional publishers, the content on LinkedIn works very differently because of the rich data we have on our platform about our individual members. And that enables us to serve them the most relevant content so that then the member is able to receive content that's individualized to them. And brands are able to tailor content to our members based on their profile data, so who they are, what industry they're in, what company they work for, what role they have there, and how they're behaving on our platform. And as a marketer, whether you're a brand marketer with goals around awareness, consideration, thought leadership, or a performance marketer with goals around leads and acquisition, or both, you have that full spectrum of responsibility, we at LinkedIn have a solution. So we have a range of content marketing solutions, but for this session and because we want to make sure to leave time for Q&A, I'll just focus on two examples of solutions we have where you can bring your story to life with visual content, as well as powerful editorial and tremendous reach all across devices, so desktop, tablet, and mobile. So the first solution I'll talk about is the SlideShare channel, and this is a place on SlideShare, which LinkedIn acquired last year, that houses your presentation, video, infographic, and other types of content. And then the second solution I'll talk about is a new solution that we're testing now and is currently in a limited release, and that's sponsored updates. So we'll look at the SlideShare channel in closer detail and then turn to sponsored updates. So here's the SlideShare channel. It's branded, as you can see. This is an example from SAP. This is their SlideShare channel. And with a SlideShare channel, you get the visual impact of the branding, and then more importantly, you get built-in distribution to all the major social networks. And in the content itself, you can do lead collection, which ties back to the funnel and the through-the-line performance tracking that Robert was talking about in his section. So there's a lot you can do with the SlideShare channel. You can, as I mentioned, share the content automatically. People can click to share to all the social platforms. You can embed a SlideShare presentation in a blog or a website as part of your own content. And then Robert also talked a lot about SEO. So the SEO of SlideShare makes it much easier to find through search. In fact, the top driver of traffic to SlideShare content is through Google search. And that's because SlideShare transcribes the presentation content into text, which will improve SEO. So there's a big SEO play with SlideShare. And once you have your best content on SlideShare, the next step is to extend the reach and share it in a big way with the SlideShare content ad. So that's this module over here on the right with the two sort of thought bubbles that will expand out in a minute. So this is a 300 by 250 that runs on the right rail on LinkedIn. You can embed the SlideShare presentation there in the unit, and the LinkedIn member can click to expand it without ever leaving the page that they're on, and then they can actually click through the presentation, and you can add a lead capture form directly in the SlideShare. So you're able to do lead collection straight out of the LinkedIn experience. People can do it, the member can do that seamlessly without interrupting their experience. They're able to engage with your content. So there's a great mid to lower funnel play with SlideShare as well. So as I mentioned, we have our new Sponsored Updates product in a limited release, and it's it builds off of the company updates, which you can already do on LinkedIn. And just like the company update, the Sponsored Update originates from your LinkedIn company page, and you can share links, videos, presentations, white papers, PDFs, commentary on trends, so the newsjacking Robert referred to, and as well as images. So really any type of content can be incorporated into a Sponsored Update. And importantly, the Sponsored Update extends, and this is what differentiates it from a company update, it extends the reach of the content to any target audience on LinkedIn, so both followers and non-followers. And then it shows up in the feed. So once it's in the feed, the member can make a social gesture, so they can like, comment, or share that update. And then that's where the network effect kicks in, and it'll then appear in the feeds of people that member is connected to. So Adobe is in our pilot. This is an update from them containing thought leadership insights from their 2013 Digital Marketing Optimization Survey. And only marketers, Adobe can target it so that only marketers see this. So it remains highly relevant as they're expanding their reach but beyond their company followers. So the Sponsored Update solution is great if you're sharing thought leadership. And I want to show you a couple other examples of how marketers are using this. So in addition to thought leadership, you can use it to drive quality leads. This also connects back to the dynamic Robert was referring to, where the lead quality on LinkedIn outstrips that of the other social competitors. So great, the Sponsored Updates are great also for lead gen. Here's an example from American Express, where they're getting high quality traffic and converting it to leads to have people join the newly revamped open forum small business community. And again, they can target this so that only small businesses can see it. Small business owners and people who have senior roles at a small business. And it's worth reiterating here, as we look at this next example from BlackRock, one of the key benefits of Sponsored Updates is their reach beyond the company followers. So, BlackRock has their company followers, but they also have things to say that would be of interest to a much wider audience of LinkedIn members that goes beyond their company followers. So here's an example. It's a post from their blog that's all about the importance of having that difficult conversation with your parents about their retirement and their financial future, especially given all the turmoil in the markets in recent years. So it's a tough conversation, but their blog gives advice on how to have that, and this is something that's relevant to a great number of members of LinkedIn, not just limited to the people who are currently following BlackRock. And on this slide, I want to talk just really briefly about an interesting dynamic we've seen where display media and content work better together. So, this isn't a case of, and I think content marketing generally is not a case of, okay, well, if it's more effective at conversion and driving leads, then let's just take all of our display budget and put it into content. It's actually the two work better together, so there's this harmonization effect. And what we've seen through internal research as we've been using this Sponsored Updates solution in a limited release is that the display actually primes people to engage with content, and the Sponsored Update in combination with display actually drives incremental engagement with Sponsored Updates when they're together in a single campaign. So we'll look at a couple of cases, and then we'll get to the Q&A portion. So here's an example from HubSpot. HubSpot was one of our first pilot customers, and they've seen very strong performance with Sponsored Updates. So they're HubSpot, in case you're not familiar with them, they're a pioneer in inbound marketing, and their aim is to help their customers make marketing that people actually love. So they're all about content marketing, and they do content marketing really well themselves. So they're publishing a lot of thought leadership and practical how-to content, and marketers on our platform find this very valuable. So this kind of how-to content works really well in sponsored updates because it's sharing, it's giving a value exchange to the member and saying, here's something that will likely help you be great at what you do, or get better at what you do, and ultimately be great at what you do, which is the kind of content our members are looking for on the platform. So HubSpot's seen high quality leads coming in, which if you've seen the slide Robert shared, that doesn't come as a surprise. And then they're able to identify the content that works best in the organic company updates they share with their followers, and then promote the ones to a much broader audience, promote the ones that are doing the best, performing the best. And we'll look at another example here with GE. This is a different content solution that we haven't talked about yet. This is content ads. So these are standard sized rich media units, 300 by 250 in the right rail of LinkedIn, and you can embed rich content in these content ads. So for GE, they were looking to enhance their reputation and promote their thought leadership in a couple different industries, primarily energy and healthcare. And as part of their campaign, they ran content ads to reach influencers and decision makers, so a select audience on LinkedIn. And they had a number of different content assets they could deploy here. So they had videos, white papers, infographics, and articles. They saw a lot of interaction with these content ads, many unique downloads, and ultimately high levels of traffic and conversion. So as these examples show, on LinkedIn, brands are able to regain influence by using LinkedIn to build relationships with professionals. And on LinkedIn, brands can have a powerful and authentic voice and can add value with insights, which is exactly what our members are looking for given the mindset they're operating in, the professional mindset. So thanks for listening. If you'd like more information, you can visit our resource center for content marketing. That's the first link there. You can also learn more about our new sponsored update solution with the second link, and that'll take you to a page for sponsored updates specifically, and you can request an invitation to use sponsored updates in this limited release period that we're in right now before launching it to the full public. So thanks again, and we'll now open it up to Q&A.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Keith. Fantastic content. I have a couple questions that are coming in. I'm trying to amalgamate a few as well, but just to maybe start off with something that would appeal across the board. And I guess I'll ask this to both of our speakers. What's the one key thing that marketers need to know to kind of kickstart a successful content marketing program? And can you provide any kind of top content marketing tips for those that are just starting out?
Sure. Well, I'll just take the first shot at that. I mean, I think the one key thing to start is to obviously begin, right? There's nothing like just jumping right in. And I think one of the smartest ways that I see organizations starting is to take something that you're already doing. Maybe it's your best performing tactic, or maybe it's your least performing tactic, or it's something that you think can work, but you're not really quite sure it has worked in the past. And then the key is starting to look at how a content, and specifically content marketing strategy, might make that thing better. In other words, how can we make advertising better, or how can we make PR better, or how can we make our demand generation using our white paper program better? And taking that one thing and seeing if you can actually either derive some efficiency out of that. In other words, can we make it less expensive to acquire leads or customers through that process? Or can we actually create more valuable customers, one of the two or both, hopefully? And then using that savings to move on. So it's not a full stop, let's turn the entire pot of water over to try and switch over to content marketing, but rather an iterative process over time. And if we can take one small thing and get a small victory there and then build on that. And maybe it's social media, quite frankly, because I'll tell you, most of the time when we see there's a really large pressure right now, as all of us know, on marketing to produce results, and especially on the newer channels like social media. Social media ROI and social media metrics and social media, proof of life, as it were, is really becoming an important part of the business. Content and a content program that supports social media engagement can be a great way to start to just sort of, dive in and start developing some results.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that I think the important thing when you're starting out is to recognize that the content you share shouldn't be just about your own talking points, your own agenda as a company, or as a unit within a company, but it should fulfill a customer need. So that's where we see a lot of success on our platform, is with marketers sharing content that speaks to a customer need or a knowledge gap, and that's where there's that value exchange happening, where someone receives the content, they get value from it because it's helping them do something better, it's helping them do something they couldn't do before, rather than just helping them educate themselves on what you're trying to sell them. So that's really fundamental to starting with a content strategy, and it doesn't mean you have to start from scratch and throw out all your marketing collateral. It just means you have to frame it in a different way or shape it in a slightly new direction so that you really amplify the value that the customer can get from it, and then within that will be embedded the value they would get if they started partnering with your company or started buying from you.
We have a question that came in. One of our viewers is a B2B public company with few potential customers, and the question is there value in social media for the sake of brand alone? And they also want to add on to that, as far as that's one part of it. The other one I want to add on is, when it comes to integrating content marketing into a company, how do you go about doing it, in the sense that kind of who is the torchbearer? Is one person in charge? Is there a committee? What's the best way to approach it as far as integrating it within your organization?
So there's two questions there, and so let me just tackle the first one first, which is this idea of a large B2B organization that has few customers, and how can social play into that. I think, so if you look at who are the personas that matter to that company, and it is going to be, in most cases, if not all cases, I have not yet run into one where it wasn't the case, that if we start looking at the buyer/user persona and then all of the personas that surround that, most of them can be called influencers, or someone that we want to engage in order to develop some sort of deeper emotional connection to that end user customer, despite how few of them there may be. So, for example, I did some work with Fairchild Semiconductor, and they, as you might expect, have very few customers, really. I mean, in terms of pure numbers, they have very few customers. They sell a lot of stuff, but they only sell it to a very small number of customers. Well, they're looking at a lot of different personas within that sales process. There's, of course, the engineer who's designing the new products that their semiconductors will go into. There are the CEOs of those companies. There are the actual users of the product themselves, and they start demanding higher, devices that need higher levels of computing power, and so on and so forth. And if you start working through that, you start to realize there are a lot of people that we can reach through a lot of different channels, inclusive of social, that are really important. And so if you start with the persona and start working out from that into the audience personas, typically what you'll find is that at least one or multiple of them will be appropriate for a social strategy using content in some form. BlackRock's a great example of how they're using content to influence a number of personas that maybe aren't their high investment B2B type of customers. To the answer in the second question, in terms of integration into the process, there are two elements there. One, Altimeter, if you're not familiar within the Altimeter group, Rebecca Lee and Jeremiah Oyang are over there doing some wonderful work in this space. And they actually just produced a paper about how a number of companies are actually constructing organizations using content at the center to drive marketing processes. And they call, whether they're called editorial boards or centers of excellence or those types of things, it's a wonderful read to see how some organizations are actually constructing the processes and integrating this into marketing more broadly as it changes with digital disruption. What I would say is that in addition to that, what I find in large companies, especially where it's getting integrated, is that it is usually built out of pockets of excellence, right? There are usually pockets of people, or call them departments or whatever they are, that are producing wonderful work. They're producing great engagement, great customer content, great, programs that are developing results. And the idea is to really sort of organically build your organization around those pockets. So it becomes more of a collaboration among teams because, let's face it, we're not going to solve the silo problem anytime soon. But if we can start to de-silo the content instead of necessarily the departments, we can start to drive a lot of greater results with a more cohesive story, more resonant content, et cetera, et cetera. So in many ways, they're finding their way instead of constructing it. So whichever way works best for you, hopefully marketing and or corporate communications and or sales enablement or whatever you call it is the one driving that, and that's who I think should be driving it.
Yeah, sure. I would just add to the first question about value in social for branding alone. I think it's probably wise to think in terms of, is there value in branding alone? Obviously, the answer is yes. And then social doesn't have to be an independent channel, but as Robert was pointing out, it should be infused into everything you're doing from a marketing standpoint because, that amplification effect and also either the cost savings or the efficiency or, the superior quality that you'll be able to get from it. So the answer, I think, is that there's value in branding alone, and social and content should be infused into the marketing strategy across the board. And then one quick note on integrating content into the company. What we're finding here at LinkedIn is that, yes, it's exactly the scenario Robert was describing, where we have our silos here, but we have pockets of experimentation and testing and learning happening, and we've convened essentially a content committee that meets on a weekly basis to discuss best practices, what they're seeing successfully working with their content. And it's enabled us to really quickly share the knowledge of what's working and what's not, and very quickly help all the teams up-level their content marketing and optimize. Each silo might have different objectives and obviously different personas, but we're able to quickly take learnings and distribute them throughout the team. So I think convening that committee is really essential, especially since there's so much experimentation that's possible and so much experimentation that's a sound strategy, because you have the opportunity with content marketing to really test and learn and try different things and see what works.
And I'm hoping we can squeeze in one last question. There was a lot of buzz on Twitter regarding your comment, Robert, on the 10% ideas. And some questions regarding, can you please give examples of some of those way out 10% ideas, and then potentially share some thoughts on companies that are doing it right or doing it excellently from your perception?
Sure. Well, there's some great examples, right? I mean, so, if you're Red Bull and you have a guy dive off of a platform, whatever it was, 200 miles above the planet, that's a 10%. That's something you're not going to really see anywhere else. And I'm not the first one to say this, and I'm not even the second or third one to say this, but, a lot of companies now are looking at Red Bull really as a media company, a content company that also happens to sell a sports drink. And in many ways, that's semi-true for almost all of our companies these days. In short, content can become an incredibly important piece of what we do as a business, not just as a marketing tactic. And Coca-Cola is the same way. They're also doing remarkable things with this. Nike is doing some remarkable things with this. Cisco on the B2B side is doing it. IBM is doing some really amazing things. SAP are doing some amazing things. You know, Cisco did a complete 7-part documentary on the history of telecommunications that each one was 7 minutes long, and it was wonderful. I mean, even if you're not interested in buying a router, you might be interested in learning about the history of telecommunications from Alexander Graham Bell to these guys who are down in Brazil now putting in complete networks to have schools connected to each other down in South America. And they connect emotionally, and they're wonderful stories. And that's a great example. There's, you know, IBM is creating, GE is one of the best, you know, Beth Comstock there is I think one of the biggest proponents of content out there, and they're doing some amazing things with content on blogs and video that are just truly outside the box. You know, in my mind, it's content that is really generating demand for something. In other words, it's not meeting the needs of a question. That truly 10% is actually content so original that you would never even, you know, think of it coming from a company that, you know, that like us, for example. And so that's really the idea is that can we do really cool, creative things that create the demand for our brand and for engagement with us that may be way beyond the scope of our product or service.
Fabulous. And with that, we're at 1 o'clock. I just want to be respectful of everyone's time. Thank you, Keith, Kang. Thank you, Robert, for an amazing hour. I really appreciate the incredible information that you shared. One request to everyone that joined us today, if you could please take out just 2 minutes of your time and fill out the online survey. It'll enable us to provide better content for you for future webinars and ensure that we address any needs or any adjustments moving forward. And also, there are a couple of questions on how the participants get a hold of this information. Everyone that attended today is going to be getting an email with a link to a recording of today's webinar within 24 hours. So thank you so much, everyone, for your time, to our panelists, to our attendees, and have a wonderful rest of the day, and hopefully we'll connect soon. Thank you. Goodbye.